A woman needs negative emotions to become deeply attached. Have you ever stopped to think that the love she feels for you might never have been about you? It seems absurd, even unfair. But it's a burning truth. A woman doesn't love who you are. She loves how you make her feel. And what's more, what she feels isn't always sweet, light, or comfortable. Sometimes what holds her back most is exactly what throws her off balance the most. Negative emotions, anxiety, uncertainty. The butterflies in her stomach that she hates but keeps her obsessed. The idea that love is born of comfort is a myth sold to men who don't understand the emotional battlefield they live in. We've been taught that showing feelings, being present, offering constant affection is the way to keep someone. But what no one tells you is that, for many women, excessive stability numbs desire. And when desire dies, love becomes an obligation. An emotional sentence, and she runs away. But calm down, this isn't a criticism of women. It's a raw analysis of the psychology of female desire, of the emotional nature that is cyclical, unstable, and deeply influenced by intense stimuli. What attracts a woman isn't peace, it's the emotional war between the fear of loss and the pleasure of keeping. And that's precisely where deep loyalty is born. Not the kind built on promises, but the kind fueled by absence, by mystery, by the possibility of the end. It may seem unfair. After all, you give everything. Daily texts, flowers on your birthday, nightly calls, a constant presence. And yet, you're left behind by the guy who barely responds, who seems too busy to care. You watch her chase after someone who never made her a priority. It revolts you, it confuses you. And it's precisely this confusion that will unravel now. Male logic tries to stabilize, but female desire is activated by emotional instability. This doesn't mean being toxic or cruel, it means understanding the mechanics behind emotional attachment. Female pleasure is born of contrast, light and shadow, sweet and savory, presence and absence. This activates her emotional brain, and when the brain is activated, the body, the attention, the bond follow suit. This is where the brutal truth that almost no one wants to face comes in. The average woman, even unconsciously, associates negative emotions with a man of higher value. Why? Because in the female unconscious, the man who creates insecurity is the man who has options, who can choose, who doesn't need her. And that's what holds her back. The paradox is cruel, but it's real. The more available you are, the more disposable you become. The more you give yourself, the more you seem to beg. And desire doesn't live in the same place as begging. Love, for many women, begins when anxiety sets in. When she feels like she might lose you. When you stop being the rug she walks on and become the mirror she can't stop looking at herself. Not at what she sees, but at what she imagines. What you hide, what you do in silence, where you are when you're not with her. It's in the void that the female mind fills with fantasies. And it's these fantasies that create attachment. Nietzsche said, "What is happiness? The feeling that power grows, that resistance has been overcome." And perhaps, in this game of seduction, a woman feels happy, precisely when she feels she's winning an emotional battle. When she needs to conquer. When she has to fight for your attention. When you become a mountain she wants to climb, not a couch she sinks into. But here's the most sensitive point. Everything you're hearing goes against what you've been taught. It goes against your instinct to please, to care, to give of yourself. And that's precisely why it hurts so much. It challenges your identity. It forces you to leave automatic mode and enter a new version, cooler, more strategic, more observant. Not out of malice, but for emotional survival. When a man becomes an absolute certainty, he ceases to be an emotion. And when you cease to be an emotion, you die in its unconscious. You grew up hearing that love is about being present, caring, and protecting. That a man who truly loves is one who is always available. That conquest is about persistence. That affection is about frequency. That bonding is about presence. This programming is so deep that many men genuinely believe that by becoming predictable and stable, they are also becoming more lovable. And that's exactly where the breakdown begins. Because this masculine logic doesn't awaken female desire. It suffocates. This is where the fatal error lies, confusing love with attraction. Love is what she feels for a father, a brother, a loyal friend. Attraction is what she feels for someone who challenges her emotionally. And these two forces are not equal. Often they are even opposites. What comforts doesn't excite. What accommodates doesn't hold. And that's why the more you give yourself, the more she distances herself. Because female desire isn't nourished by constancy, it's fueled by tension. When a man begins to act as an emotional caregiver, he doesn't realize he's slowly disconnecting from the role of lover to assume that of emotional support. And a woman, even unconsciously, responds to this with a subtle but lethal behavior shift. She becomes less affectionate. She begins to test more, to respond less, to desire the opposite of what she receives. And worst of all, she can't explain why. But she feels it. And in the game of attraction, what she feels is what sets the tone. It doesn't matter what she says, promises, or rationalizes. A woman is a slave to her own emotions, and her emotions are volatile, changeable, highly reactive to the emotional environment you create. What the average man doesn't realize is that by trying to be the ideal boyfriend, he's actually becoming a shallow emotional experience. And women hate emotional predictability. Because women seek movement, flow, contrast. As Robert Greene says in The Art of Seduction, continuous presence becomes invisible. The more present you are, the less impact you have. It's scarcity that creates value, absence that generates imagination, silence that plants desire. She doesn't cling to the guy who says good morning every day. She clings to the guy who disappears for 3 days and then shows up with a disarming look, because this man activates her instinct to win her back. He makes her brain release dopamine from uncertainty. And dopamine is the hormone of addiction. When you offer too much consistency, you kill the emotional swings that create this cycle of addiction. You become predictable. And predictable is the worst adjective a man can receive from a woman. How many relationships fall apart after the couple moves in together? How many marriages become celibate after 2 years of emotional stability? This is no coincidence. It's a consequence. Because once the environment is no longer emotionally stimulating, a woman seeks excitement elsewhere, and often that place is another man. See, it's not about malice, it's about programming. Her brain is constantly seeking emotional stimulation. And when you become static, even if you're loving, you cease to be a stimulus. You become routine. And routine for women is like a sexual sedative. It kills arousal, admiration, and ultimately respect. And when she loses respect, the end has already begun. Respect is the emotional basis of desire. A woman will only surrender to a man she feels is greater than her on some level, be it emotional, spiritual, financial, or social. When you become too equal, too self-giving, too accessible, you lose that invisible throne. And she, even unconsciously, begins looking for another man to place on the emotional altar you vacated. This is why the nice guy suffers so much. He doesn't understand why he loses to the scoundrel. He has more presence, more affection, more dedication. But he lacks impact. And women don't get addicted to good men. They get addicted to unforgettable men. And what makes a man unforgettable is the emotional tension he causes. History is full of examples. Cleopatra conquered 2 of the most powerful men in the world, Caesar and Mark Antony, not through beauty, but through emotional intelligence and the strategic use of absence and mystery. Casanova wasn't the most handsome, he was the most unpredictable. Marilyn Monroe was desired for her controlled vulnerability. All these names have something in common. They created emotional tension. They offered measured doses of presence and absence. They were never 100% available. And because of that, they were never forgotten. The predictable man, on the other hand, disappears from her memory as soon as someone who makes her feel something more intense comes along. Because the female brain isn't loyal to promises. It's loyal to emotions. And if you stop generating emotion, you lose your place. That's why secure love is an illusion. It seems like the right path, but it silently destroys desire. A woman may even love you in theory, but in practice she'll desire someone else. And when desire dies, there's no longer a real bond. Only convenience. And here comes the brutal twist. Everything you thought was a demonstration of love, sending constant messages, opening yourself emotionally without criteria, always being available, sharing all your plans and vulnerabilities, all of this may be being read by her as low value, like need, like dependence. And this kills desire because female desire feeds on scarcity, on doubt, on mystery, on does he still want me? It's in this space of uncertainty that she begins to invest more, to give herself more, to desire more. The man who holds her emotionally is not the one who makes her feel safe all the time. It's the one who makes her feel like he could leave at any moment, yet she still chooses to stay. And that choice, when it comes from a man who could disappear, is what makes her feel chosen, desired, addicted. The great irony? You don't have to be cruel to cause this. You just have to stop trying to be loved all the time. You have to focus more on yourself and less on her. Because when you make her the center of your world, you remove yourself from the center of hers. When you chase too much, she chases less. When you insist, she resists. Secure love, absolute emotional comfort, unwavering presence, all of this sounds beautiful. But in the female emotional world, all of this becomes invisible. And nothing is more dangerous than being invisible to someone you love. But what if I told you there's a way to create intense emotional attachment without cheap games or manipulation? That there's a type of negative emotion she seeks, even without admitting it, and that when you master it, you become unforgettable? The answer lies in emotional anxiety, in fear of loss, in space, in strategic silence. And that's what we're going to talk about now. Because understanding this is mastering the key to sustained attraction and to the bond that never breaks. Have you ever noticed how she becomes more affectionate when you've been away for a while? How she starts sending sweeter messages, showing more interest, wanting to know more about your life? This isn't a coincidence, it's anxiety. And anxiety is the hidden engine of female attachment. While men cling to presence, women cling to emotional tension. And tension arises precisely from the space between doubt and confirmation. From, does he still want me? Mixed with, why doesn't he respond like he used to? This space is where her mind begins to work for you. It's in this emotional limbo that she begins to project. And projecting is imagining. And imagining is feeling. When she doesn't have all the answers, she fills the gaps with emotion. This is basic neuroscience. The human brain hates uncertainty. But the female brain, when emotionally involved, becomes addicted to it. That's why the guy who doesn't respond immediately, who doesn't give all the explanations, who isn't always available, becomes an obsession. Because he activates her emotional surveillance mode. She begins to pay attention to every detail, to look for signs, to interpret silences, and this creates presence, even in absence. The man who causes this anxiety, even without speaking, is on her mind. And where there is mental presence, there is attachment. See, I'm not talking about playing games. I'm talking about understanding what truly moves a woman's emotions. Knowing that bonding isn't born from logic, but from fluctuation. Continuous emotional stability is interpreted by her as the end of stimulation. But when there is unpredictability, when you break the pattern, you activate an internal alert that ignites desire. And this is where many get it all mixed up. Because they believe that causing negative emotions is being rude, toxic, or abusive. This is emotional stupidity. True seduction lies in subtlety, a calculated disappearance, a curt response, a more distant look, an unexplained absence, a weekend of silence. Each of these acts, when done by a man who has already caused an emotional impact, plants a seed of anxiety. And this anxiety turns into attachment. Is it cruel? Maybe. But that's how it works. And to deny it is to choose loss. Because while you offer comfort, she falls for another's controlled chaos. For the man who makes her feel, not just think, and feeling for her is everything. This is the dark bond she'll never admit. She'll say she hates it, that she can't stand it, that she wants a man who's present, constant, transparent. But observe her behavior, not her words. A woman can recite a poem about stability, but she'll give herself to someone who makes her afraid of losing. Because this fear activates the most primitive part of her, the desire for conquest. A woman wants to win the man she feels she might lose. And this fear makes her invest more, give more of herself, surrender more. Think about how her brain reacts when you take a long time to respond, when you disappear for a day, when you change your tone, when you stop complimenting, when you stop chasing. She starts to think, did I do something wrong? Did he lose interest? Could there be someone else? And by thinking all this, she's completely connected to you, even without you doing anything. This is the power of strategic absence. It makes her invest emotionally without you lifting a finger. Because attachment is born of uncertainty. This is the mechanics of emotional addiction. The dopamine released in moments of contact after absence is much more intense. It's the same principle as gambling. An unpredictable reward releases more dopamine than a constant one. Therefore, a man who disappears and reappears, who fluctuates, who doesn't give everything at once, has the same effect on her as an addiction. She wants more. And the more she wants, the more involved she becomes. And the more involved she becomes, the more loyal she becomes, not out of obligation, but out of emotional dependence. This dependence, of course, needs to be measured, because if you're too cold, she breaks, but if you're too constant, she settles. Balance is the art. And the art lies in mastering the alternation between presence and absence, between sweetness and silence, between involvement and indifference, not like a dirty game, but like an emotional dance. Seduction is rhythm. And the perfect rhythm isn't linear. It's full of pauses. That's how Casanova seduced. Not with promises, but with mystery. He didn't reveal everything, he wasn't always present, he didn't explain every move. He was an artist of absence, and absence creates fantasy. And fantasy is where desire lives. When you respond to every message, share every detail, make yourself completely accessible, you kill the mystery. And without mystery, there's no attachment. Because her attachment is fueled by curiosity, and curiosity is born of doubt. That's why you need to learn to use silence, to create space, to disappear sometimes, not as punishment, but as a technique, so that she breathes desire, so that she misses you, so that she notices your absence and by contrast, values your presence. The man who never disappears is never missed, and the one who is never missed is never remembered intensely. How many times have you seen her chasing after a guy who treated her with disdain, who was never there when she needed him, who didn't call the next day? You thought she was stupid, but she was addicted. Addicted to the emotional roller coaster. Because this roller coaster, despite being painful, made her feel. And feeling for her is what matters. It doesn't matter if you're handsome, rich, or intelligent. If you don't evoke emotion, she forgets you. But if you make her feel fear, doubt, euphoria, longing, insecurity, she memorizes you. An emotional memory is what breeds loyalty, because her body gets used to feeling you. And this emotional familiarity is what turns interest into dependence. Women are addicted to their own feelings. They don't connect with you. They connect with how they feel around you. And they feel closer when they're afraid of losing you, when they're on high alert, when they're investing energy to keep you there. A woman who doesn't feel she needs to win you over stops trying. That's why silence is so powerful, because it's interpreted as risk, and risk is adrenaline, and adrenaline is excitement. Don't confuse this with playing hard to get. Playing hard to get is artificial. Authentic silence comes from a man who's too busy with his own world to chase. It comes from someone who isn't dependent, who isn't trying to be loved, who doesn't need to please. He simply is. And being is more powerful than appearing. When you internalize this attitude, you stop chasing attention. You understand that the woman who truly desires you will seek you out, and if she doesn't, it's because she never valued you. And in that case, you'd better leave, because a man who values himself doesn't force connection. It allows the female emotional universe to adjust to your frequency, not the other way around. The anxiety you cause transforms into affection, the fear of loss into desire, space into presence, silence into music. This is the paradox of seduction. The less you give, the more she wants. The less you explain, the more she imagines. And the less you try, the more she surrenders. This is the art of creating emotional attachment without saying a word. And whoever masters this, masters the invisible game of attraction. But there is something even more powerful than anxiety, more magnetic than the fear of loss, something she feels and can't resist, something that doesn't need to be said, explained, or simulated. The true core of attraction, the presence of an unshakable man. And that's what we're going to reveal now. Because more important than knowing what to do is becoming someone impossible to shake. She feels everything, every silence, every hesitation, every emotional weakness disguised as excessive affection. She doesn't listen to what you say, she scans what you convey. And that's why, no matter how much you master techniques, strategies, or words, nothing compares to the brutal power of an unshakable presence. The true master of seduction isn't the one who plays the best. It's the one who doesn't need to play. Because he's already won internally. You know who he is. He walks into any room and people notice, not because of what he wears or what he says, but because he carries something invisible, absolute emotional control. He doesn't seek validation, doesn't try to please, doesn't force conversation. He's there, and the simple fact of being there transforms the atmosphere. Women look, men observe, and no one can explain why. It's because his presence vibrates on a different frequency. He doesn't react, he leads. This is the unshakable man, the gravitational center of the feminine universe, the emotional anchor in a world of impulses and confusion. And why is he so magnetic? Because he represents everything she can't control. He doesn't despair, he doesn't give in easily, he doesn't beg for affection. He stays. While most men are emotionally volatile, reacting to every ignored message, every mood swing, every game she plays, the unshakable man watches. He observes, he reads the game, but he doesn't get emotionally involved. And it's this attitude that disarms her. Because deep down, she's always testing. Not consciously, but instinctively. Testing your strength, your stability, your ability to hold firm even when she wavers. She wants to lose herself, but she needs to know you won't lose yourself with her. And when she realizes you don't sway with her emotional storms, that you don't give in to drama, that you don't change your stance to please, she surrenders. Because now you represent something rare. Emotional stability in a body of desire. You become a safe haven and a challenge at the same time. And that is irresistible. Nietzsche said that he who has a why to live can endure almost any how. The unshakable man has this why. He is driven by something greater than a woman's approval. He has a mission, focus, purpose, and purpose is what separates the seducers from the seduced. Because the man who lives to please is always adapting. But the man who lives to fulfill his destiny, he attracts naturally. He doesn't seek, he is sought. See, the game of seduction is not won by force. It is won by the absence of need. When you don't need to conquer, you conquer. When you don't need to convince, you influence. And when you don't need to prove, you are respected. Respect is born of mystery, but it is sustained by solidity. That's why the emotionally volatile man never holds a woman for long. He can win her over with looks, with speech, with tactics, but he loses the moment he reveals himself to be needy. Because neediness is the opposite of desire. The needy wants something. What is desired is what everyone wants. And this difference begins within, in the inner silence of those who know themselves, of those who don't react impulsively, of those who don't give up emotions as currency. The unshakable man doesn't explain his absence. He doesn't justify his silence. He doesn't defend himself in the face of trials. He simply lives. And this purposeful life, without the anxiety to please, becomes irresistible. Because he represents freedom. And a woman desires the man she feels she can never completely capture. She desires what she respects, and she respects what she fears losing. And she only fears losing the man who emotionally has already learned to lose himself. Because this man doesn't negotiate with emotional blackmail. He doesn't give in to the pressure of instant approval. He understands that time is on his side, that female attraction doesn't respond to haste, but to the perception of value built in absence. And what's more, he knows that a woman is an emotional mirror, that she reflects his energy. When he despairs, she distances herself. When he calms down, she draws closer. When he clings, she lets go. When he lets go, she clings. This invisible dance is governed by a single principle. Whoever holds the emotional center of control holds the power. And you only conquer this center when you understand that it's not about her. It's about you, your focus, your evolution, your discipline, your inner world. You're not here to serve her emotionally. You're here to grow, to become, to refine yourself. And on this journey, the woman who's worth it will align with you, not the other way around. So stop trying to prove your worth. Become valuable. Stop seeking attention. Make your presence felt. Stop reacting to what she does. Build a reality so powerful that she wants to be a part of it. Because the unshakable man is the one who doesn't need the woman. But that's exactly why they all want to stay. And when you become that man, something magical happens. You stop chasing. You stop suffering. You stop trying to understand her every reaction. Because now you understand a brutal truth. She's not looking for the most handsome, the richest, or the most affectionate. She's looking for the one who makes her feel. And no one makes a woman feel more than the man who stands firm while her world shakes. That's your role. Not to be the most perfect, but the most emotionally present. Not in the sense of being there all the time, but to be a rock, a center, a pillar. And when you occupy that place, everything changes. Because now, even without saying anything, you've already said it all. And her body listens, her soul responds, and desire is born. You become not only unforgettable, but irremovable.